Good evening, students. Just wanted the confirmation regarding my voice. Good evening, all of you. I'm back with the newspaper reading. Yesterday, my class got over a little too early. Suddenly, there was a problem with the YouTube. So, today I'll actually make up. I'll also quickly summarize some of the things of yesterday which went missing. Yes, yes. Yes, now I have received confirmation. My So my voice is pretty prominently. I can able to hear my voice. So great. On that note, let me begin with today's class. Welcome all of you to Unacademy.com, India's largest online learning platform or e-learning platform. We are of course leaders in several areas in the country. Management and CAT are also fields that we are looking at to crack very soon. This is a brief profile of myself. My name is Aritro Dasgupta, and I'm an MBA in Forest Management from the IFM in Indian Institute of Forest Management in Bhopal. Got a decade's experience in the areas of teaching, training, strategy, consulting, and in content writing. My experience has primarily been India, but I've also worked in the Middle East and been published in North America. Last half a decade, I have been heavily involved with the coaching industry and rank holders for several exams such as CAT, CLAT, DUJAT, etc. have been my students during this period. Right, so today I'm gonna took up one session in the morning where I completed the March current affairs. Right now I'm gonna take up this thing, the newspaper session for today. So 31st of August. I'll also do a bit of yesterday's paper. Yesterday I did take a class, but it got over a little too quick. So because of sudden issues with the YouTube. So what all you're going to get on unacademy.com, just have a look. One is you get daily live classes. You also receive, there are live tests and quizzes as well. So on our, there's a live chat window on the right hand side of the YouTube. That's where I engage with students regarding the live classes. The course content is structured from the head office itself. You also get unlimited access to classes. The moment you are enrolled, you can go through n number of sessions on our platform. Right, this is a good list of some of our leading educators. They are mostly from verbal and reasoning and quants background. I of course will be taking general awareness for you guys, conducting classes for general awareness, which is such an important topic as well. So you receive live classes. This is how you receive notifications for different classes. And for example, if you want to do profit and loss, this is how you receive notification. This is a sample of how you receive notifications for the batches. So for instance, in case you want to set up a batch purely with one educator on one subject, then नीचे का जो schedule है वो सही है. लेकिन अगर आपको पूरा syllabus करना है and that too with so of course पूरे syllabus के लिए one faculty can't usually take care of it. So we have an entire team for that. So ऊपर वाला जो notification, that is for the entire course curriculum. Right, we've always believed that language is simply a medium to communicate, not should never be a barrier. Instead, it should be a bridge, which is why our educators teach in 16 different languages, including English, Hindi, Malayalam, and Tamil. And while I was filling up for one of the classes, today I have a special class at 4 p.m. I even got the option of Spanish. So you can see the number of wide options we have. Right, we have a schedule that works for you very well. You can learn anytime, anywhere. So even if you missed out on a live class, you can look at recordings. You can go to visit the archives and go through all the previous sessions, as well as there are you can download the sessions as well. Right. So there are live polls. I told you here as well on YouTube.com's live chat window. But apart from that, on unacademy.com especially, we have a number of these live polls. There is a method of poll asking. So that is something we do utilize quite a bit. If you look at the other two blocks here, as I told you, you can interact with us at any time. So on the right hand side, कोई भी आप लोगों के doubts हो, please feel free to interact with us on this thing. Right, as I told you, there are other sessions. So एक session अभी कुछ time पहले complete हुआ, उसका भी यहाँ पे नीचे information है. So a lot of these sessions that we have taken, you will find information on this channel. Crack management exams. एक दूसरा channel है Let's Crack Management Exams. तो वो और ये they are different, right? Okay, so apart from the tests that we give you on the spot, you also have those which are planned from the head office. Right, so that includes a full-length mock, and in addition you receive detailed reports for all the questions that you go through, including for every topic. That is of course available, and of course all these classes that we take. For example, today morning I completed March current affairs on YouTube, and after this, immediately after this session is over, about an hour later I will be taking a session on unacademy.com. That there I will be discussing with you guys June current affairs, so do watch out for that as well. उसका detailed PDF आपको मिलेगा, आप download करके अपने पास रख सकते हैं. Right, so this is my code at the bottom. YouTube में भी लिखा होगा. If I go to show more, यहाँ पे लिखा दिया हुआ है AD09. So you can use this. You will receive a flat 10% off. तो मैं चाहता हूँ आप ये slides देख ले एक बार, ताकि आपको समझ आ जाए exactly what are the requirements and what all you will receive as part of the package. Right, my apologies while adjusting the laptop. There was some. Anyway, so I think you've all gone through this. As you can clearly understand, that the long-term program you go for, the lesser amount of money you need to pay per month. While a 1 month course is technically cheaper, but if you go for 24 months, then per month payment is 75% less. And this is in addition to the 10% flat off that you are anyway getting for the. Right, so on that note, we are done with the introduction on Unacademy. I will now begin with the session, and as I told you, I will be doing the newspaper session today. So let me just get today's Hindu, which I think is your favorite newspaper when it comes to current affairs. So this is the paper for today, the Hindu, as usual, the one that I start with. The first article I would like to talk to you about is yesterday our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, he addressed the nation in one of his Mann Ki Baat, and there were several things that he did speak about, but one of the most prominent things that really came out was his declaration of support for the toy industry. Toy industry, he says, quoting data, is that it is worth 7 lakh crores. That's a lot of money worldwide that the industry is worth. He also says that this is something where India should really tap into. There's a story towards the end of today's newspaper where I talk about the toy industry and certain parts of India, how they are gearing up, how they felt massively encouraged by yesterday's Mann Ki Baat, and they will be taking steps to rectify this. So I'll actually quote the exact points which our Prime Minister spoke. He says, "You will be surprised to know that the global toy industry is of more than 7 lakh crores, such a big business, but India's share is very little in this. You now just spare a thought for a nation which has so much of heritage, tradition, variety, young population. Will it feel good to have such little share in the toy market?" So that's basically the encouragement. He also reiterated the slogan of "Do Gaz ki Duri, mask hai zaruri, or maintaining 6 feet distance and wearing mask are essential. Right. So there is also clarification from one of the government departments. This is the Department of Personnel and Training. This has reiterated that voluntary retirement or premature retirement does not amount to a penalty. In fact, you are freeing up space for younger people to take up positions. So anybody who did go through premature retirement, there were some cases where they faced criticism that has now been rebuffed by the DOPT, or Department of Personnel and Training, claiming that that is not valid. This is part of the fundamental rule five, part of the rules 1972 about the company working patterns. We've been speaking about floods in several states, and one state which has escaped our attention because it wasn't affected so badly until recently, that is Odisha. So, if I take you through to the timeline of floods this year, it started with Assam, went to Bihar, Kerala suffered, Maharashtra suffered, Andhra Pradesh were very badly hit. But now we are seeing two new epicenters. One is Madhya Pradesh. I did report to you yesterday briefly about MP and the inundation caused in the northern part of the in some districts of the state. Now there is also Odisha, where shockingly 14 lakh people have been affected and 17 have been killed in the floods. About 2.65 lakh people have been marooned in 340 villages. 1.6 lakh hectares of cropland has been hit. So while agriculture has been sort of a saving grace in these past few months, this might further bring trouble, right? So this has happened because of shall we say, low pressure area built on the Bay of Bengal, from which certain amount of water did seep in. This has been confirmed by Mr. Pradeep Jena, who's the managing director of the State Disaster Management Authority, or SDMA. Moving on further, so there are 14 units of the NDRF, or National Disaster Response Force, and 17 units of the Odisha Disaster Rapid Action Force, ODRAF. Odisha's handling of natural calamities is usually considered gold standard. Most states in the country aspire to those levels. In fact, neighboring West Bengal a couple of months back had this horrible cyclone Amphan, and Odisha was one of the first states to send help because of the expertise the state has in this area. The water has also flown into the Hirakud Reservoir, with upper catchment also going to be hurt by this. Right? There's news from the state of Haryana. Haryana has been making changes to its lockdown rules quite frequently of late. So it started with a weekend lockdown, then it moved to a Monday, Tuesday lockdown, and now all 7 days are open in Haryana. Moving on further, so now this is good news probably for the business community. Of course, social distancing will need to be maintained. This is part of Unlock 4, and of course, these privileges and benefits can be taken back in case there is something of a major rise in cases. But as of now, it seems things are fairly safe. Right. Moving on to another part of the country. In fact, I'm sticking to Odisha, where which we were just talking about. Now, in Odisha, I don't know if you've heard of this term. It's not specific to Odisha, but generally, I don't know if you're aware. मैंने current affairs classes में ये discuss किया था. Are you aware of this term called GI? In fact, I will expand the question. Are you aware of this term IPR? Let's see if you guys can answer. What is an IPR? Right. Okay. So basically, let me just explain this to you. Some of you would be coming up with certain terms, but let me just quickly get into it. So IPR stands for intellectual property rights. This is about certain property which is not directly touchable, it is intangible, but it is a creation of the mind. So it primarily includes patents, copyrights, and trademarks. We've discussed about this in the past. Patents are for scientific inventions, copyrights are for artistic creations, and patents are for scientific inventions, copyrights are for artistic creations, and trademarks are for company logos, etc. Logos and taglines, right? Brands basically. GI, on the other hand, geographical indication, this is for something which is about commodities. Commodities from a certain area, they receive a certain protection. For instance, Darjeeling tea. Now, in case you're all aware, Darjeeling is like really famous for tea. So in case I visit Darjeeling and I pluck some leaves on some, bring some seeds back home, and in the mountains of Kumaon, let's say, which is in Uttarakhand, I plant some seeds and they do sprout into trees, into tea bushes. I still cannot call them as Darjeeling tea. The reason being, there is a history that is associated. There's also something to do with the terrain, the soil, the water, the moisture, and also the history of the people. Somewhere intangibly, all the people are connected. Right? Similarly, there is Banarasi Pan, Banarasi Sari, the Kolhapuri Chappal, Kolhapur in Maharashtra, very famous for certain kinds of creation. The Ratnagiri Alfonso mango, so on and so forth. There are many, many GIs. In fact, this year also lots of new commodities were awarded a GI. And the GI registry in India, it's in Chennai, it's a court, and that is what registers all of this. So one of the GIs which I wanted to talk to you, this is about a certain variety of turmeric. You all know what is turmeric. It is haldi. Hindi में हम हल्दी बोलते हैं उसको. इसको last year, so not all kinds of haldi, but there's a specific brand of haldi which is grown in the Kandhamal district of Odisha. Now, little bit on Kandhamal, that area is highly forested and hilly, which makes it ideal for the growth of turmeric, right? However, because of the hilly and forested land, transporting of the produce to the big city has its own couple of challenges. तो इसके लिए क्या किया जाता है? So last year, after it received the GI tag, there was widespread expectation that this year, Kandhamal is not exactly tribal territory, but there is a large tribal population here as well. So last year, after this GI tag, there was instant belief that the business would skyrocket, and that's what usually happens. You know, like in West Bengal, Rasgulla was given the GI tag. Odisha's Rasgulla, of course, slightly different. Both these received GI tags, and then the business boomed because people suddenly have a renewed interest towards that product. This is what we were expecting last year, but none of that took place. Thanks to the lockdown, thanks to the fact that there are so many there are transport restrictions, inter-district, inter-state restrictions, and less than 20% of the raw turmeric has been, in fact, this is shocking. Matlab, out of 5 quintals, only 1 quintal on average has been sold. Even less than that, it says less than 20%. In fact, after it received the GI tag, if the production was actually ramped up, lots of people who were into other products, they thought of this as an opportunity, as a golden opportunity, and started producing in great numbers the turmeric. I'll just I'll just take off the curtains, maybe that will improve the light. Somehow there is no light on my face, which is why I decided, let's see if it improves somewhat. Okay, moving on further. So, yeah, so in fact, many people shifted from other crops. They were actually growing other things, but then they shifted towards turmeric, and we did not really see the kind of they were expecting growth, but ulta ho gaya. They are unable to sell their basic produce. There is news from West Bengal. The finance minister of the state, Mr. Amit Mitra, he is of course from the ruling Trinamool Congress. He, last couple of days there has been a lot of debate between the states and the center regarding GST payments. The center owes the states huge amounts of GST payments which are pending for months. As a solution, the center has asked the states to borrow from the RBI. Definitely a certain portion can be easily procured, says the RBI. However, Mr. Mitra affirms that this is going to lead to this will crush federalism, because what is happening, the center has in this financially in this financial method, they are reducing the powers of the states. Also, what is happening is um, the states will need to borrow money from the RBI or any other such body at a higher price. The center gets it at a lower price. So that is also something that is worrying several of the states in India, right? Okay. And this is especially in the non-BJP states. This is of a particular concern. Right, moving on, I told you about the new epicenters of flood, and I told you about Odisha. Let me show you one aerial picture from the state of Madhya Pradesh. I stayed in Madhya Pradesh for 2 years, and I know it rains a lot there. But even then, this year apparently the rain records have broken all the records. There has not been so much of rain for more than 2 decades, since the year 1999. So that is absolutely shocking. This is a view from this town of Hoshangabad, which is near Bhopal. You can imagine, if such big, relatively urban areas such as Hoshangabad are so badly hit, how would the rest of the state pop up? Right. So I'll move on to the second page of the newspaper of the Hindu. So there is also this report from the NRC. Last year, an NRC was completed in Assam. The NRC is something which has led to a lot of misinformation among the people. So I guess it'll be good if you can hear it from me, the whole detail in an objective manner without getting into any sides, and that will help you assess the situation. So what happened basically is, in the 1970s, there was 1971. India and Pakistan fought a war, and East Pakistan became Bangladesh, an independent country. During this period, there was mass migration from East Pakistan or East Bengal, or what became Bangladesh, into Assam. Obviously, Assam being the neighboring state, many of them did visit Assam. Assam is also a state with a historical amount of migration, because if you go back 150 years back, the population of the state was quite low. It was sparsely populated. So once the tea gardens got established, that's when the population started picking up. The British government, in fact, encouraged migration. So what happened over a period of time is, 1980s, there was quite a movement of removing outsiders. Now please understand, this was not based on religion or language, although it ended up targeting people of a certain language group, but that was not the aim. It just happened that people of a certain language group were in large numbers, but it was not against any ethnicity or religion. It was simply the fact that the locals were dwindling in percentage. That was changing the demographics of the state, and thus the voting patterns as well. There was a regional party which emerged, known as the AGP, or the Assam Gana Parishad, which became the first non-Congress party in the state to stake claim to power. In fact, in 1986, the AGP seized power, and it formed government for 5 years. Then Congress came back for 5 years. Then again AGP came back. So AGP did have 2 terms. 2001 onwards, of course, Congress was back for this time for good for 15 consecutive years, before getting displaced by BJP, which is an ally of the AGP. Now, moving into this thing, there was this, always this talk of lots of outsiders. So that is why this NRC was conducted, and that led to 19 lakh people being stranded. They they are apparently outsiders, because they could not prove that their families had been in India till before a certain cutoff date. As per the Assam Accord, that has to be sometime in 1971. So these 19 lakh people, many of them are now in limbo, because they do not really know what is up next. There are also claims that many of them may not be outsiders, but they might actually be locals. I don't want to get into that, because I have not really gone through such a detailed study. But of course, so many of these people then applied that with further documentation stating that they do have proof of being here before 71, and that this is a mistake to keep them on this list. And so this process had started of striking of names, but as per today's report, many people who are excluded in the NRC, they are now stuck in limbo, right? Which is like they don't really know what's up next. Okay, there is something called a foreigners' tribunal. That is where, if they want, they can appeal to. Okay, great. Now I'm moving on to the next page, page number 2. AGP is now an ally of the BJP. It's part of the NDA government. Okay, so there is this piece of sort of investigative journalism on the school fees in school fees from different schools. This story is especially from the city of Gurugram in Haryana, outside Delhi, and it's as per the laws that have been mandated since the start of the first lockdown, schools can charge tuition fees because they are conducting online classes, but they can't charge other infrastructural fees, especially if they have themselves received moratorium on paying land rents and other land related payments. So what is happening is there is a lot of confusion. Apparently, as per this report, a lot of schools have been charging money through other means under different heads. So that is currently being looked into. The Transport Minister of Delhi, Mr. Kailash Gehlot, who is from the ruling Aam Aadmi Party, he says reopening of the Delhi Metro is a huge relief. The Delhi Metro, I think you might be aware, is reopening from 7th of September. In fact, lots of all the metros in different cities are opening up, even in Kolkata, I think in Mumbai as well, in Gurugram, they're all opening up with, of course, certain norms being practiced. There is this picture, a poignant picture from the Jama Masjid mosque in Delhi, and because yesterday was Muharram, so it's a solemn exercise, not the usual crowds, much lesser crowds, and of course the use of masks among many, though I can't see all of them wearing, but yeah, many of them are complying with masks. Okay, Facebook and Google, we've been speaking a lot about these tech giants. There was also this tax imposed in the European Union known as the GAFA tax. Do read up a little about the GAFA tax. GAFA stands for Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. You could also include Microsoft in this. These are the big tech companies which are levying a lot of price. So what Facebook and Google are doing is they have been asked to clear their stand on child pornography. So one of the ways in which Google and Facebook they escape the sort of cases that others face, please understand, is the fact that they are merely platforms, and that's an advantage they take. So for instance, if I have a fight with somebody, let's say, and that person abuses me on WhatsApp by the way is owned by Facebook, or if I have a video on YouTube, I hope not this one, but let's say something else, उसके नीचे किसी ने मेरे बारे में कुछ बुरा कह दिया, like something really bad. Again, whom do I complain to? YouTube is owned by Google, but Google is not advocating. Google is simply a platform, right? Facebook is simply a platform. WhatsApp is a platform. तो मेरे पास WhatsApp से मैसेज आया, उसमें WhatsApp की गलती नहीं है, उस इंसान की गलती है. So if there is some case to be made or some anger, that boils down to that person and not the company. So that's where Google and Facebook, they stay away. However, there is increasing pressure that these companies need to take a stand on child pornography, which is something I think everybody agrees on all sides of the political spectrum is something which is really really harmful for entire society. So uske liye bola gaya hai inko. Right? Great. Okay, तो मैं तीसरे पेज पे पहुंचता हूँ, and this is a claim that the Delhi government has been making, that the hospitals in Delhi are so good that many of the visitors are from outside the city state, and this has actually been shown here as well. 40% of the beds occupied in August are from people outside Delhi. So majority of them obviously from the neighboring states of Uttar Pradesh and Haryana. Both these states share a land boundary with Delhi, of course. Mr. Satyendra Jain, who's the health minister of Delhi, a lot of this data he has provided. So there are 820 containment zones in Delhi, and of course more than 7,000 people under home isolation. So Delhi has also seen this case of some hospitals where the staff has not been paid. I think this is a problem many states have suffered. So there is a particular hospital called the Hindu Rao Hospital, which is in North Delhi. So the nurses there have written to the North Delhi Municipal Corporation or the NDMC, as well as to the mayor of the city, regarding the fact that these nurses have not been paid salary for several months. So this is really sad. Earlier, apparently, even in the Kasturba hospital, something similar had been reported. I really hope this can be taken care of very soon, because obviously, nurses, they are our frontline warriors and the most essential, along with doctors and paramedical staff, in this entire fight. There is one pharmacy company, generally last couple of months have been fairly good for the pharmacy sector. The pharmaceutical sector has made decent money, while several industries have done badly or even gone towards collapse. One of the companies, however, which is the DSGMC, which is the Delhi Sikh Gurudwara Management Committee, that has a pharmacy, and they are selling medicines at 70 to 80% less than the MRP. So they are selling at factory prices, not at the MRP. So this I think is again a noble task which is done by this group. The Indian Meteorological Department, or the IMD, has confirmed this has been the rainiest August in 7 years. Maximum amount of rain, which has been good for agriculture. We've seen increase in acreage planted, but we've also noticed how terrible has been the flooding scenario. There's some sad news regarding noted cardiologist Dr. Padmavati Sivaramakrishna Iyer. She has passed away. She was 103 years old. She's also a former recipient of the Padma Bhushan in 1967 and the Padma Vibhushan, which is even higher, in 1992. Also the recipient of the Harvard Medical International Award, the Dr. B.C. Roy Award. Dr. B.C. Roy, he was one of the earliest chief ministers of West Bengal, a noted doctor himself. In fact, India's National Doctors Day is named after him. He was that kind of a legendary doctor and a really able administrator. Dr. B.C. Roy Award, and also the Kamla Menon Research Award. She had a disciplined lifestyle, which is why she was able to live till 103. Right, Odisha, on the one hand, I told you they were suffering from economic crisis. One of the examples was the Haldi issue. Odisha is also seeing terrible flooding, but Odisha has also seen the virus tally breach the 1 lakh mark. By the way, talking of India as a whole, yesterday India crossed 80,000 new cases, and India becomes the first country in the world to cross 80,000 for a single day. So yeah, we are in quite a bad position actually. I mean, because the lockdowns have been going on for so long, people are sort of getting restless, people are moving out. But the fact remains that the problem is not over. In fact, it is only increasing. Right? So in Odisha, the peak should be by middle of September. That's what it says. I told you a few days back about a really important episode about Mizoram state having its elections. Mizoram, as you know, small state, so perhaps not many people would have paid much heed to it. That too, for not for a state election or national election, but for municipal and panchayat election. But what was significant now was it was the first election of any kind in India since the first lockdowns got effected towards the end of March. Many elections are now pending, such as the municipal elections in West Bengal, the tribal council election in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, the panchayat elections in Uttar Pradesh, the by-polls in Madhya Pradesh and UP and several other states, but most significantly the Bihar assembly elections, which will be held in November, has been confirmed by the Election Commission. Now in Tripura, I told you that the tribal council elections have not been held in Assam and Arunachal. Please understand, Assam and Arunachal, they have designated tribal belts which fall under the Schedule 6, which is why, so whole states are not Schedule 6, but certain parts of these two states are. But here, so they have separate tribal councils, places where tribals are a majority. Tripura also has some of these tribal belts, so Tripura will be having elections by year, and that has been confirmed. There is a Tripura Tribal Areas Autonomous District Council, or TTAADC. There is the Kokborok tribe, which is quite dominant in Tripura. They of course say that they are the original inhabitants of the state, and so that it's going to be a three-pronged battle. Mainly it's two sides. One is the left front headed by the CPIM, also involving CPI, Forward Bloc and RSP. You also have the other side is the BJP alliance, which also includes, I think, one regional party, which is the Indigenous Peoples Front of Tripura. That has, of course, a lot of tribal members. The Congress is also there as the third group, and although it's mainly going to be a BJP versus CPIM fight, but Congress is third on the list. Its main partner is Indigenous Nationalist Party of Tripura, right? Also a tribal dominated party. Right. There is some news from Madhya Pradesh, not just about flooding, but something else actually. So there is this. I'll read out to you the headline, and I think that will explain to you quite a bit. So, MP Village returns to conventional mode as e-learning remains elusive. The sub headline: Parents of just two of the 98 students have smartphones. Erratic electricity supply and poor internet connectivity pose hurdles to learning. So what has happened is, that over last half a year or 6 months, so many schools and educational institutes have had to close down, if not permanently, but at least temporarily. Many students, especially from the lower rungs of society, economically lower rungs, they have had to leave their schools and their education. Online, it's not so easy. As it says, in this small area in Madhya Pradesh, out of 98 families, only two families have got smartphones. Not possible for the other. So what they are doing is they have converted their terraces into mini classrooms from where lessons are being conducted. There is ample amount of social distancing which is being maintained here. Right, and in fact they have been in an information lockout for several months. For almost 6 months the Kamal Nath government has not been in place. It's been The BJP has come back under the leadership of Shri Shivraj Singh Chauhan, but these students were not aware. They're not aware about the Chinese incursion into India or the floods in Assam, which, by the way, many more educated people will also not know. Not much of coverage in mainstream media. Right, moving on, in Maharashtra, there is going to be a rally for reopening of temples, and surprisingly, it is being led by one party called the VBA, or Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi, which is now run by the grandson of B.R. Ambedkar. It's Mr. Prakash Ambedkar. Now, VBA, a lot of its voters are the scheduled castes or Dalits. They were in an alliance with the AIMIM in last year's Lok Sabha election, but they fought the Vidhan Sabha on their own. I don't think they have a single seat, but they are going to congregate near the Vitthal Rukmini temple in Pune to protest for it. So bus services have been suspended by the state government because they fear that in such a rally, the rally is legal, no problem, but social distancing may not be followed here. So yeah, fair enough. That's right. There is also this report of poor air quality in the smart cities. Some of you might be aware that when Mr. Modi first became the Prime Minister, one of the first schemes he launched was the Smart Cities Mission. That, however, does not seem to be going on very well. We have this body known as the National Clean Air Program, which has studied these 100 odd cities which have been selected under the Smart Cities Mission. Initially, 20 cities were selected, but overall, about 109 cities have been selected. So, as per this report from the NCAP, these, shall we say, these cities, they do suffer from poor air quality, and there was this aim. One of the aims, objectives of this, including these cities into this plan, was to reduce particulate air pollution by between 20 to 30%. That doesn't seem to have happened as per this report. There is also a Pune based NGO called Parisar, which has prepared a report of 6 smart cities all in Maharashtra, which are Pune, Nashik, Aurangabad, Nagpur, Thane, and Solapur. And again, likewise, it does not find much proof of air being cleaned. So the Health Minister of Maharashtra, Mr. Rajesh Tope, he has reiterated something that many others from different states are also confirming is that the number of cases in India and in his state has actually risen. He's talking of his state, but it probably applies for the whole country. Number of cases are rising. It is because of much increased testing. The testing has been ramped up significantly, which is why this has taken place. Right, there is some sort of disagreement in northern Maharashtra, northern Karnataka, in the district of Belagavi, also known as Belgaon, regarding some of the statues. The Karnataka government wants to put up a statue of Sri Rayanna, who was a freedom fighter in the 18th century, a tribal leader as well. There is also the statue of Shivaji Maharaj next to it. So, of course, the latter is extremely prized, the statue, among the Marathi speaking population, because this is in a bordering area between the states of Maharashtra and Karnataka. So, some clashes have been reported from here. Right, more than 2,000 people have now been shifted from the Narmada banks of the Narmada River, which is flooding, of course, in MP, and even in Nagpur, which is in Maharashtra. Many people have been evacuated, about 14,000 people, because of this thing, because of heavy rains. Right, I'm now moving on to one of your favorite pages of the paper, which is the editorial. So I'll start with the one right on top. Let me read out to you the headline and the sub headline. Okay, so the headline reads, a development that will hardly put India at ease. The sub headline is, the World Bank's decision to halt its annual doing business report on data authenticity issues has major implications. So, guys, in all these current affairs classes we've had, not the newspaper ones, but the current affairs sessions, one of the things that I have always been telling you is that several of the, shall we say, indexes. There's so many indexes. Every month we are doing a 2 to 3 indexes. Most of the indexes we see India is not performing well. One of the exceptions for the last couple of years has been the ease of doing business, or the doing business report, which the World Bank brings out. India's rank was 142 a few years back, came down to 130, then 100, then 77, 63. So we've really been improving significantly, substantially. So while the economy wasn't doing great, at least the, shall we say, mechanisms were being put into place, right? That was the idea, that over a period of time this would reflect. However, that does not seem to be the case. So it is not confirmed whether India's record is going good or bad. In fact, yesterday I discussed with you something about what Mr. Amitabh Kant says, who's the CEO of the Niti Aayog. What I will mention is the fact that, so there is no confirmation that India is doing things wrong. It's just that there are general lapses in the data collection. Right? Yeah. Um, So the writer, let me give you his credentials. He's Mr. R. Nagaraj. He was with the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research in Mumbai. He speaks about how most of the data that World Bank collects, it is by lawyers but not by the real business community. He also states how the information is merely collected from the two biggest cities of Delhi and Mumbai, and not really at the hinterland or in other big cities like Bengaluru or Kolkata or Chennai. He also talks about Make in India, and that not really corroborating with the growth in this index. And then he cites examples from countries such as Russia, Chile, and China. So I'm just giving you his points, and I will give you my take on this. So first of all, he says that Russia's ranking has, I mean, while India's has grown, Russia's has gone up tremendously. It's somewhere in the top 20 or something. He also says that China, however, has been hovering between 78 and 96 for several years. Chile, on the other hand, went down steeply when they had the government of Mr. Mashale. He was the previous guy, but since he got replaced by a more right-wing government, the average rankings has gone up. So he does say that there seems to be a bias in this thing. So what my take is that there may be bias. See, I think in all studies and all surveys, there is to quite some extent of bias is possible. Now, I must give you my personal examples. I often have these discussions with people in normal family chats, and I often quote, that this is our ranking, and or this is the ranking of this state in some national ranking. That proves that this is so. So people often tell me, "Ye sab rank so biased hai." So my point is, it could be biased, but it's probably better than anything else. For want of any better solutions, do we have any better solution? A random person speaking anything on YouTube or Facebook or WhatsApp, do you trust that more? Even अगर इसमें थोड़ी गलती हो, I am saying that शायद 20% गलती हुई हो. That's a massive figure, but it can't be 80% wrong. That's my belief that all these indexes collected by World Bank, World Economic Forum, or the Reserve Bank of India, Ministry of let's say Ministry of Commerce, Forbes magazine, Fortune, they are by and large reliable. I mean, even if there is something wrong, it may not be 100%, but it's probably better than anything else. So I will go by, I won't say blindly, but I'll go by them as much as possible. But I do understand there may be flaws. For me, the problem is this won't come up. So I was really hoping we'll enter the top 50 this year. It does not seem to be the case. Maybe next to next year, when it does come back, we'll be in the top 35. So I can only hope for that. There's also this article by Miss Catherine Hadda. She is an adjunct fellow with the CSIS Wadhwani Chair in US India Policy Studies, and also a prime senior US diplomat who recently served as the US Consul General in Hyderabad. She speaks about the Indo-China situation. Specifically, she talks about how there is a lot of rhetoric of anti-China both in India and in several other countries of the world, like in Japan, USA, Australia, etc. However, it has not really translated into real benefits for India. So what she says that India does have this image, at least something which we have built ourselves, is that we are very different to China. We are a democratic institution with we are a democratic country with reliable institutions, fairly clean judiciary. I'm using the word fairly because, again, there may be flaws. We all know our system may have flaws, but it's still at least not a one party country or a one man country like China is. So the policies, they are more inclusive in India. That's what it says. However, for many outsiders, this has not really translated. India is still seen as a country which is levying extra costs on foreign companies. There's nothing wrong in that because obviously building local top companies, everybody would like to do that. Nothing wrong in that. It's not exactly protectionist, but where like the Volkswagen Group has accused India of being protectionist. This may not be protectionist, but it is definitely something which is not auguring well with the Western world. So the World Trade Organization as well, it has a dispute panel which recently looked into quite a few cases involving China. And yes, there are signs that the Chinese global hegemony on trade might suffer. But again, on the ground, we don't really. There is at least a lot of policy thinking. A lot of people are considering such a thing. But so far, it hasn't really boiled down to anything practical on the ground. Right, moving on. Okay. There is this damning report from the Indian media, and this is something that I must say. You guys are really lucky to be having these classes on Unacademy so that you're getting genuine information. Our media channels, most of them are so smitten by this Sushant Singh Rajput case. While it's okay, I understand it's a fairly important case, but these media trials that are happening, I mean, the media does not is not supposed to call you guilty. We have the courts for that, but one girl, Ria Chakrabarti, she might be let's say guilty. Fair enough, that could be, but let the courts decide. Let the CBI come up with this. Let the ED prove something. Why is the media getting into such a one-sided story. So, and also there's blanket coverage. I do understand that you have whatever opinions, but why do you show the same news story so much? That is something which this article has written about. This article has been written by Mr. Mohammad Ayub, who is a University Distinguished Professor Emeritus of International Relations from the Michigan State University. And I've told you before that in the Hindu, you often get articles which are 50 years back or 100 years back on the exact same date. And there's this interesting article that right now we are all suffering, the whole planet is suffering some way or the other from the COVID-19 pandemic. 50 years back on this day, there was a cholera epidemic. The World Health Organization, the same WHO, which had been, of course, we are talking about how it has been active in this. And cholera has been something which has been troubling developing countries, warmer countries all these years. And it has even mentioned Assam and East Pakistan, which later became Bangladesh, as the epicenter. However, there is a fear that it might also go to the better developed Western countries, the ones which have better sanitation norms and also which are less warm, they're colder. So that's surprising. But in the USSR, Odessa is now part of Ukraine. But Odessa has also seen Astrakhan and Odessa. These cities have seen problems. So the port of Odessa, one of the biggest ports in the erstwhile USSR, that has been closed down so that more cases of cholera do not arrive. Right, so quite an interesting thing. Maybe not directly relevant today, but we are seeing the COVID-19, and somehow it feels like a deja vu, as if we've seen this all. Okay, I do need to keep checking YouTube. I don't know if you're aware, yesterday suddenly the session got over after 42 minutes while मेरी तरफ से streaming चल रहा था. You know, this is how I get the streaming through our OBS device, but कल कुछ odd हो गया था situation. That is why I'm constantly flipping here and there. Hope that is not a distraction for you guys. Just to remind you, this is the code AD09. Please take a look at this. Right, moving on to the next page. Most of it is something which I've discussed about in the past. So the government in Kerala, which is the LDF, Left Democratic Force, comprising of CPI, CPIM, NCP, and a few other smaller parties. The LDF government's achievements are going to be laid out by the Chief Minister, Mr. Pinarayi Vijayan himself from the CPIM. He's also talking about 100 days. He wants 100 days exactly from today by when the economy will spur back into action, he feels. He's also spoken about free food kits that would reach 88 lakh ration card holders monthly, at least until December. And he's also spoken about direct benefits transfer of about 1300 rupees per family they would be getting every month, and many other this thing as well. There are plans to support some traditional industries such as traditional coir, toddy, which is local alcohol, and fisheries sector. So all of that is going to get a lot of. In fact, Kerala wants schools to be reopened not before next year's January. This is quite shocking, whereas most states are at least considering the possibility of October. The good thing is Kerala has taken a long-term plan. Otherwise, what's happening is every 15 days or 30 days, we are shifting school reopening by maybe a month or 15 days. So at least he's taken a long-term decision, which the Chief Minister has announced. Let's see how it works out, because this is something the whole country has to work on together, not states individually. I've been telling you last couple of days how South India has been suffering real badly from new cases of COVID-19. Telangana, no exception. 69% of the cases in Telangana apparently are asymptomatic, which is again raises other complications. Okay, however, even within this pandemic, economic activity is taking place. Fortunately, in Karnataka, the Chief Minister, Mr. B.S. Yedurappa, who is from the BJP, he has flagged off a new train called the Ro train, which will go all the way to Solapur in Maharashtra. So this maiden roll on, roll off. That's how it is called. Roll on, roll off. So anybody can hop on. It's a bit like hop on, hop off, except that it's a train and not a bus. And this would have 42 loaded trucks on this. as part of open wagons. So Minister of State for Railways, Mr. Suresh Angadi, he was also there present and says that this is going to be really beneficial, especially the Pinia industrial area will be massively benefited. Right, Karnataka is going to announce today the Unlock 4 norms. Most states have gone out and announced it, but Karnataka is going to join the fray now. I had told you earlier today about our Prime Minister's idea about making India a country which does very well on toy sector, and I was telling you that there is a particular story which I would like to share with you guys, and here it is. So there is this town called Channapatna, which is in the state of Karnataka, not far from Mysuru. This is a town which is famous for traditional toys, right? So a lot of these artisans have been making these traditional toys for years, but because the income has been dwindling due to several factors, one of them being online digital games that kids are playing with. So that is one of the reasons why these artisans have, over a period of generations, been leaving their traditional jobs, migrating to the cities to get something else. And however, that this latest announcement by the Prime Minister, although the Prime Minister did not really come up with any specific scheme, but the good thing is that he did take out time to speak about the humble toy industry, and that has given a lot of these people hope that something will be done very soon, and that will also lure the younger generation back to their traditional art. Toy making, by the way, is an art. It's not something to be it's not just a toy, right? It's actually an art, a work of art. Moving on to the next page, the former envoy to the US, Mr. K.S. Bajpai, he has passed away. So a lot of tributes on his name. There's some important news from the central government is that the census, which is expected to be held, obviously it's held every 10 years. So 2021 is the next date, but the preparations start from 2020. That may not take place. Now this is going to be dangerous. Dangerous in the sense that we will not get reliable data, timely reliable data. In fact, one of the articles I read out to you yesterday from the editorial was about how essential timely data is, right? So this is something we will need to look into pretty shortly. Along with the census also not taking place will be NPR, which is a National Population Register, where all our names will be registered. So this may also be delayed because of COVID-19 and due to restrictions on movement, social distancing norms. All this may be delayed. Remember, this time's census is particularly critical because we will also map OBC data. Until now, we were only collecting SC and ST data, but OBC population, which is estimated at 44%, the word estimate will no longer have to be used because we'll get the exact figures. It will also help us delineate what is creamy layer and which is non-creamy layer within the OBC category. Ram Madhav, who's a very senior politician from the BJP, he's actually the general secretary of the party. He has said that there will be flexibility regarding the RCEP. Remember, the Modi government said no to the RCEP. We did show a lot of initial enthusiasm. Then we pulled out of this deal, citing unfair trade. Not exactly unfair, but unfavorable. There's a difference between unfair and unfavorable. Unfair is when the other person is trying to get an advantage over you. Unfavorable is due to circumstances. It is not. We are not on the benefits receiving end. So because of unfavorable conditions, we did not join RCEP. RCEP has 15 members. 10 of them are the ASEAN nations from Southeast Asia. You also have Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, and USA. These are the 15 countries. Plus, of course, India would have joined, but India declined to be the 16th member. Ram Madhav, however, says there's still a possibility. Nothing is closed forever. We will debate more of this and see how it works out. There's also China, I think, in the group. I think instead of USA, it's China. Not really sure. I think USA is part of the East Asia Summit. I probably got confused to an extent. Anyway, moving ahead. So there is a word, I don't know if you're aware of this term. It's known as PTSD. Have you heard of this term, PTSD? Let me see if you guys can answer. PTSD. Can somebody tell me the full form of this term? PTSD. So PTSD stands for post traumatic stress disorder. Right. Okay, so post-traumatic stress disorder, this is what happens is once a human being suffers a trauma, which could be anything. It could be a personal event, it could be a sexual assault, it could be academic or career failure, and of course it can also be something to do with a disease, and specifically right now COVID-19. So a lot of people who are actually surviving COVID-19, they have survived, apparently gained immunity, even they are suffering from PTSD. They are traumatized by their experience during the period and their near death experience. And in fact, a study was conducted over Google Forms. Google Form, you use that quite often. This was a survey which was conducted by the Department of Community Medicine in the Vardhaman Mahavir Medical College and by the Safdarjung Hospital, both based in New Delhi. So they looked into they studied not just people who suffered COVID, but also everyone else, even people like you and me who may not have been affected directly by the disease, but we have been at home. Our social gathering, social connect has reduced drastically. So this is also about those things, right? So several people have confirmed that they have faced some problem or the other. 28.2% were found to have PTSD, so that's almost a third, bit more than a fourth. 55.6 had trouble sleeping. 64% reported that they were jumpy and easily startled quite a bit. 2.6% said they experienced it in extreme manner. 64% the lockdown hadn't happened or wasn't real. They often felt that they would suddenly wake up from some terrible dream. I think we've all felt that at some stage. 82.1% of them reported that reminders of it caused them to have physical reactions such as sweating, breathing trouble, or nausea. So, really scary. And I really hope all of you take care. Mental health, not given much importance in India historically, but now it is gaining importance because we've realized until now it was considered that we have so many problems. Mental health is just, it's for rich people and for developed countries, but that's not the case. Anybody can suffer at any time. So, okay, moving on, Sri Nitin Gadkari, who's the Union Minister for Roadways, Shipping, also for MSMEs, he has unveiled several new infrastructure projects, which includes 3 bridges and 2 roads. And this is total 400 crore project. And where has he started? That's pretty interesting. So there is this foundation. He's laid down the foundation stone for 4 bridge projects across 4 rivers. Where has he laid it? That's very interesting. Has anybody heard about this district in Maharashtra known as Gadchiroli? Gadchiroli, Gadchiroli, Gadchiroli. So what is Gadchiroli? It's the only, or okay, the only major district only district in Maharashtra to be severely affected by left-wing extremism. It is towards the border with, I think, towards MP, and in the eastern side of Maharashtra, and it has seen a lot of these Naxalite or Maoist movements in the past. So maybe the idea is that with development, the people will, sort of start coming out of the problems. A panel has been formed, which will be headed by Congress Deputy Leader in the Rajya Sabha, Mr. Anand Sharma. This will look into the lockdown impact on mental health. Anand Sharma had also earlier worked on the GST when the GST was first being proposed. He had worked in the ring fencing of the GST. So now he's also working in this. This panel has also been briefed by ICMR Chief Mr. Balram Bhargav and the AIMS Director Mr. Randeep Guleria. And of course, how older people are especially having more psychological disorders because they don't tend to go out of homes much. It has also affected migrant workers, a lot of people who are of the working class. In Madhya Pradesh, is 11,000 people in total who have been rescued. 454 villages in 12 districts have been very severely affected. The chief minister has, of course, all the 267 people have also been airlifted by the Air Force using helicopters. The chief minister, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, has confirmed that rain has reduced and thus the discharge from dams has also reduced in several districts. The Sihor district and Raisen district are amongst the worst hit in Madhya Pradesh. There's also supplement on education, today it is there. But before that, I also want to talk to you about something which is really important. Some of you might take it as a joke, but it's not a joke at all. In fact, in Meerut this year, the first ever memorial to service animals, military service animals, has been started. And indeed, a lot of army dogs have now been felicitated by the president. So, two of the names, one is Vida and the other is Sophie. Vida's photo is there, and they have both received the COAS commendation cards, which is the Chief of Army Staff commendation cards. They have been dogs that have helped out in detecting landmines and done a lot of work in, with the army and the also with in disaster relief, which is again something where the army does get involved in. Right, moving on. So Israel and France, both these countries, they've been claiming that Hezbollah is partly Hezbollah, the terrorist body in Lebanon. It's apparently funded by Iran. Hezbollah is open to discussions with France, right? Because they've suffered some reverses in recent months. Israel has been up at them. Overall, globally, COVID-19 cases has crossed 25 million. Even places like New Zealand and South Korea, which had seen a stoppage, they have once again experienced local cases. In New Zealand, face masks were not compulsory anymore, but now they have been compulsory once again. I have spoken to you earlier about Mr. Ashraf Ghani. He is the president of Afghanistan. He is on a second consecutive term. So Ashraf Ghani has had a discussion with the Taliban. He wants greater peace with the Taliban, because of which council has been set up to look into. It's a predominantly tribal council which will have dialogues with the Loya Jirga and the Taliban to understand the issues on both sides. This will be led by Mr. Abdullah. We've been speaking about the phenomenal success of Israel's diplomacy in recent weeks, especially with United Arab Emirates, whose economic boycott of Israel has stopped. They've also established diplomatic ties. It is a first with an Arab country or a Muslim country, one of the first with a Muslim country. So now these two Israel now says, Netanyahu, the president, he has confirmed that this is the first of many, as Israel is also in secret talks with several other countries. He and his team, of course, can't yet reveal the identity of these countries, but they are in talks with several others. And very soon, we could see greater amount of peace deals with Israel. Singapore is one country which has seen various waves of COVID-19 It's start, stop, start, stop. So now they're going to offer free tests to taxi drivers and street hawkers, considering that these two groups are amongst the most vulnerable. They cannot stay at home. They do need to go out. It's a matter of survival, which is why these groups will be provided additional protection. Finally, from this page, I had told you earlier about TikTok and the fact that Microsoft might soon buy TikTok's holdings in USA and maybe also in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The owner of TikTok, which is ByteDance, that's the name of the group. They, however, are furious about this, and thus China's approval may be needed, even for buying the holdings in USA. Even for that, there may be further many of these items have been added to the shall we say restricted list, so that is where the Chinese government's approval may be needed. Right, moving on to the last page, which is into sports. So we're gonna start the US Open lawn tennis tournament today itself, which of course is one of the premier Grand Slam events in a year, and it always takes place in Flushing Meadows in New York City. But this year it's going to be very different. There has been a spate of pullouts due to COVID-19 and social distancing. Two of the players who will be participating, however, is Novak Djokovic in the men's game. He's a 17-time Grand Slam winner, just two behind Rafael Nadal now. So he wins, he'll be just two short of Roger Federer, one short of Nadal. If he wins it, he's odds-on favorite because there's no Nadal or Federer this time. Serena Williams also looking for yet another Grand Slam. She's of course there in the women's segment. I told you about Lionel Messi wanting to leave Barcelona. There was this rumor which came out that he could apparently leave for a free. There was no transfer fee that would be involved. However, that has been quashed by the La Liga, which is the league of Spain, and so that will not be the case. There will be a transfer fee. In fact, his the release clause is worth 700 million euros. That does seem quite impossible, even for the richest of clubs. That who knows if that can be triggered, but at least there is some transfer fee in his case. Right, India and Russia, they are the joint champions, these two countries, for online chess tournament. So there is also a report on the safety to be used applied in boxing. The Asian Boxing Confederation has declared the same. Arsenal, I mean, the previous football season has barely ended. The new season has begun. We had the Community Shield on Saturday, which is always the season opener. The winner of the Premier League faces the winner of the FA Cup. It's often considered a glorified friendly, but it's an official match. It's a trophy. So Liverpool, the Premier League champions, faced Arsenal, the Cup champions. It was 1-1 in the end, but Arsenal won on penalties. So congratulations, yet another trophy for Arsenal, having won the FA Cup, I think less than a month back. I can't even recall when was it held. It was so soon. Next weekend, usually this is held a week before the Premier League begins, but this time it'll take one more week. It'll be a 2 days this week because next weekend we are going to have international matches. So England, for example, faces I think Denmark and Iceland over the couple of matches. So that's what's going to take place. Lewis Hamilton has won yet another Grand Prix. This one is the Belgian Grand Prix, which is held in Spa-Francorchamps. Mercedes' first victory in Belgium since 2017. In fact, first and second are both from the Mercedes constructors. Second is his teammate Bottas. England has beaten Pakistan yet again in a T20 match. Owen Morgan scoring 66 runs in the match. So I'm done with today's Hindu. I do wish to talk a little bit about yesterday's because I was unable to discuss a couple of points with you guys when the session abruptly closed down. In fact, I kept on speaking, but you guys, of course, could not. Then I had to close the session. So I do have some points which I need to discuss with you guys. So before I go on to the main Hindu, I want to talk to you about the magazine segment because being Sunday, Sunday is a day when you have a lot of other articles which are not directly related to current affairs, but they do have a massive impact. So I wanted to talk to you about this headline article which says, okay, let me just read out to you: hunters or the hunted. These kind of articles, they are long surviving, which is why it doesn't matter कि कल का मैं आज पढ़ रहा हूँ or vice versa. So let me just read out to you a bit from this. So this is the article, as you can see, yesterday's thing, which suddenly got over. But anyway, moving on. I'll just turn on my charger. Let's just connect the charger. Right. Okay. So we often have this belief. Now let me just okay. So when this pandemic was first declared and we saw the first lockdowns, one of the first things that we all came to know was how the poaching, poaching of animals in some ways or the other is connected with this pandemic, because there would have been no pandemic had wild animals not been consumed in China. I mean, at least that's the preliminary as of now what we do know. And of course, there would have been no wild animals in the Chinese wet markets had these wild animals not been poached. These animals can't be bred; they can only be poached from the wildlife. They can be bred. There are methods, but it's much more complex. So usually they're hunted. Now there was also a report in one of the leading. I won't say leading, but yeah, it's mostly on social media. A group of hunters with a couple of dead animals on their shoulders, and how this had happened immediately after the lockdown. And there was mass disgruntlement about this. There were also articles from about certain states which are tribal dominated, such as in the northeast of the country or from Andaman and Nicobar, and how people have there are lots of these racist stereotypes as well about people consuming certain animals such as dogs. We do see a lot of these reports. A lot of cultural shaming about Nagaland people apparently having dogs. There was also this movie on Netflix called Akhuni, which actually brought out a lot of these racist stereotypes that a lot of people in our country have about their own countrymen. Now, one of the things is we need to understand there's a lot of hypocrisy we have. It is at the policy level that forest clearances are done, and that's what displaces wild animals, and then they come to our houses. Let's not forget that. But anyway, not getting into all that. So there are certain tribes, please understand, in India, and I said this before and I'm going to repeat this. In Africa, conservation is like a main business. Why? Because African countries, one of the best methods at foreign exchange earning is through tourism, especially wildlife tourism. So countries such as Kenya in particular, Kenya, Tanzania and South Africa, they have done exceptionally well when it comes to forest conservation. Again, one of the reasons is those countries are not so densely populated as ours is. So they've been able to relocate their tribal populations. Tanzania did that quite effectively to different parts of their own country. In Kenya, the Maasai tribe has remained in and around the forest edges. But apart from the Maasais, mostly that has not been the case. So why has that happened? In India, on the other hand, things are very different. India being so densely populated, we've always had people living in or around forests. So any of these forest conservation acts which have been taken, we always have two sides. One is the conservationists, the other side we have sociologists. They are often at loggerheads with each other, and that has impeded a lot of our strengths because we are a densely populated country. Tanzania में possible हो सकता है relocate करके कहीं और. हमारे देश में हर जगह इतने लोग हैं, कहाँ पे आप रखोगे? Plus, a lot of these forest based tribals, they have known certain arts for hundreds of years. Now if you suddenly relocate them to some other agricultural land, unko nahi aata, and they lose their livelihood, they become daily wage laborers, right? So this creates a lot of problem for both sides. So right? So, for example, this article talks about the Soliga tribe in Karnataka who were displaced after dams were built and overnight lost their livelihoods. The article also talks about the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 and the later Forest Rights Act 2006. The first one was very pro conservation, and so a lot of human beings were shifted out. The one in 2006 was a little bit more humane. Right, so a lot of these people do not have the means for other trades in life. So while it is true that the disease of Ebola and several other zoonotic diseases, they have come up because of our close interaction with wild animals, but to blame all of it on these poachers is often quite uh, myopic, and it is much more complex, the overall procedure. Please also understand that a lot of these people are called poachers simply because of land laws. And I'll give you an example of rivers. For instance, a river moves say over 100 kilometers a stretch, and people are doing fishing for hundreds of years. उसके बीच का एक stretch है, let's say किलोमीटर नंबर 30 to 70, उसको सडनली आपने नेशनल पार्क बना दिया, तो वहां पे जो लोग फिशिंग इतने सालों से कर रहे हैं वो ओवरनाइट पोचर बन गए. आप समझ रहे हो? सो ये सब चीजें बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स है. वन साइडेड सोशल मीडिया में समझना, दैट्स एक्चुअली क्वाइट डिफिकल्ट. Talking of, we're just talking of Africa. There's great news from Africa. The continent of Africa is now free of polio, and I think this continent has seen a lot of suffering when it comes to diseases. But yeah, this is definitely a great. I think every human being ought to be really thrilled with the fact that polio has been eliminated from a country. Renowned writer Pankaj Mishra has come up with a new book where he has written against liberalism, the political concept of liberalism. So it's known as Bland Fanatics, Liberals, Race and Empire. Right, there is also an article from this East European country called Bulgaria, and about travel in that country, how it's a unique country. Fair enough, I'm done with this. I'll quickly go through yesterday's newspaper from some of the parts that were missed out on, but I really want to discuss. So yesterday, of course, was National Sports Day. Day before yesterday was National Sports Day. So yesterday's paper spoke about some of the stars who did receive the awards. For instance, 5 athletes, for the first time ever, 5 athletes were presented with the Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award. It was presented by the Sports Minister, Mr. Kiren Rijiju, who is an MP, BJP MP from Arunachal Pradesh. Among the winners was archer Atanu Das, athlete Duti Chand, table tennis player Manika Batra, and also wrestler Vinesh Phogat, who, by the way, is now COVID-19 positive. There's also Rani Rampal. So there were 3 women who received this award as well. The other awards were also present. This was all connected online. Abhinav Bindra, the legendary shooter, so far the only Indian to have won a individual gold medal in the Olympics. He has praised the Odisha model, saying that Odisha will emerge as a pretty strong sporting state in the next couple of years. Suresh Raina, former Indian cricketer, national cricketer, plays for Chennai Super Kings. His uncle has passed away. Due to that reason, he has returned to India. There is, of course, news about Unacademy being the IPL partner. Chadwick Boseman has passed away, the guy who made history by becoming the first African American actor to have played the role of Black Panther. Okay, now I want to discuss with you about some issue in the Middle East concerning Israel and Palestine. Now, Israel, of course, the problems began in the 19th century when it saw the first wave of pogroms or attacks against Jewish populations in Europe. So lots of Jews in the 19th century migrated to Palestine, which was historically their land. I mean, if you go back to biblical times, but they had been displaced for thousands of years. which is why they had been in Europe all this while. But of course, now they were coming back due to the atrocities. Now, Britain, on the other hand, which was ruling over Palestine, bowing down to pressure, they did accept that the Jews should be given a homeland. And of course, don't forget, one of the British Empire's greatest financiers was the Rothschild Bank, which was run on the top, from the top, by a Jewish family. So these were some of the reasons why Britain had to accept that. Post the Second World War, of course, they saw a massive international outrage and a wave of sympathy for the Jewish people, outrage against those anybody who would say anything against the Jews, of course, which is why Jewish homeland was planned, which led to many Palestinians or Arabs being evicted out overnight. Over the next 2 decades, Israel and the Arab countries faced quite a few wars. The most traumatic of them for the Arabs was 1967, often dubbed the Six-Day War, in which Israel thrashed the Arab armies. So after that, the Arabs never really put up a joint force against Israel. Well, they have done token things, but in terms of a military coming together, that never happened. But on the contrary, that this energized the Palestinian project. So Yasser Arafat, who led the PLO, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization, became really active after that. Initially from Jordan, but later on he was evicted from Jordan. He moved to Lebanon. Lebanon, mein the Israelis attacked, got him evicted. He then fled to Tunisia. Tunisia, say he spoke about intifadas, or suicide bombers, spate of attacks on Israel. Some of that did happen, but all of it died down by the early 90s. Eventually, Yitzhak Rabin, who was the Israeli prime minister at the time, and Yasser Arafat, they came together for a peace process, which was held in USA, mediated by the Americans at a place called Camp David. And after that, both of them received the Nobel Peace Prize, both Israel and Palestinian heads. And the problem did solve to quite an extent. Today, Israel holds 23% more land than what was initially allotted. They have not returned any of their lands, do not plan to. In fact, they have put up Jewish settlements all over this area to discourage any return of Arab settlement. However, what they have done is the only plot of land they have ever returned is the Sinai Peninsula, which the Sinai Desert, they returned it to Egypt. Right. There is also an article on the Jaish-e-Mohammed, which does seem to be the main organization behind the Pulwama attacks last year in Jammu and Kashmir. Also, there is an article on Mr. Shinzo Abe, the president of Japan, Prime Minister of Japan. Shinzo Abe has always spoken about his deep friendship towards India. One of the reasons being that his father was a foreign minister of Japan. His grandfather, however, who was also the prime minister of Japan for a brief period, his grandfather was extremely grateful to India and Pandit Nehru, our first prime minister in particular, because at that time, immediately after the Second World War, Japan's name was quite low because Japan had, I know a lot of people have a lot of sympathy for Japan due to the nuclear bomb attack, but before that, Japan had done some terrible things, especially to other Asian countries like China, Philippines, Indonesia, Myanmar, etc. So anyway, not getting into that, but so Japan did have a pretty low name, but Nehru was one of the first global leaders to give Japan space, and that is when Japan needed a lot of support, and it did receive a lot of support from the Indian people, who were among the first to sympathize because of the the nuclear bombs hurled at Japan. Remember, India and Japan, they do share. In 1905, Japan defeated Russia in a war. That was the first time in modern era that an Asian country defeated a European. So Indians who were fighting for independence back then, especially in Bengal, which was the intellectual and political epicenter against the British rule. So in Bengal, he was highly celebrated. And Japan was highly celebrated. Lots of Bengali poetry written in honor of this Japanese victory. There is also a proposal by Japan. I'll read out to you the name. It's called the SCRI, or Supply Chain Resource Resilience Initiative. SCRI, Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, which is something that Australia and India are two countries that Japan has discussed closely with. About a fourth of all imports to Japan until the pandemic used to come from China. That overnight disappeared thanks to the lockdowns in China, in Wuhan, and that led to much economic loss happening in Japan. So Japan says that all the production and the supply chain, they need to be created in such a way कि किसी एक पे बहुत ज्यादा प्रेशर ना हो, कहीं एक जगह अगर प्रॉब्लम हो वो पूरे जगह डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हो जाए ताकि एक के ऊपर हम बहुत ज्यादा डिपेंडेंट ना रहे. And in fact, this article states that Japan is not being protectionist in this way. They are not exactly bringing companies to Japan. They are just giving incentives to companies working in China, Japanese companies, to relocate elsewhere. It could be another foreign country. So point ये नहीं कि चाइना से कि जापान में वापस लाना, इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड के खिलाफ नहीं है. It's just that you distribute it to other countries in that region. Right, so Japan is looking for a response from India. Australia pretty much agrees on many things. Australia also dependent highly on China for its imports and exports, but in India, China is about 14% of all imports, but about 45% in some sectors such as electronics, maybe even more so when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Right, so I've spoken a lot at non-stop almost because I had to cover a lot of topics within the 1.5 hours stipulated. This session was for 1.5 hours, so I didn't want to exceed on that. 2 दिन का मैंने cover किया है इसमें. In case you have any doubts, do let me know. This is my code at the bottom, AD09. So please use this in case you wish to enroll. Do like, share, and subscribe. Promote the word. I'll just get some water. You guys put in your comments whatever you have. Any doubts? Right, so I just got this same brass bottle refilled. So I think fair enough. In 1 hour's time, my special class begins. I'm gonna do the first part, the second part of June current affairs. So be present for that. Looking forward to have all of you there. Don't miss that class. Thank you so much. Tomorrow I'm taking a well-deserved break because month end we do plan a lot of stuff. Right, and I'm also engaged in some personal thing matters tomorrow. So wonderful meeting you guys. Thank you so much. See you all very soon. This is my code once again, AD09.